Do what thou will be the whole piece of law.
Welcome back, or if this is your first time, welcome. Today, I'm going to be doing something that is a little out of the ordinary, so I'm going to feel the need to plaster an audio and visual warning that the video today contains a lot of ideas that may be toxic if you are of a certain religious group or, just any decent person in general. So the warning is, these ideas are not my own. I am merely putting this out for satire. See, feds, I have the crown of satire on. That means you can't ban me. But anyway, if you're a decent human being, I would recommend you click off this video. But if you're like me and you like watching insane people melt down and, diving into the world of grand conspiracy with the computer god at its helm, I would advise you stick around, because today has a lot of subject matter that I don't think I would touch with a 10-foot pole, but I don't want to do this one like the history of Germany in a previous video. I might actually try and include that in the big old Francis deck video, but not a guarantee. Today, we are going to be touching on, I think I'm past a minute now, so I think I can start saying all the weird things. So, that fun topic, Israel. Well, you know how a bunch of unsavory persons have this idea called the Zionist-occupied government? Francis Deck is going to give us his take on it. Now, if you don't know who Francis Deck is, he is someone who is a third positionist to the third position, so I guess he's like a ninth positionist on the political spectrum. Someone who lived in Nassau County, doxes himself more often than I can count, so if you ever want to find out his address, which has been bulldozed at this point, go for it. But he wants to talk about how the computer god and certain groups of people who will receive various forms of censorship. If it's combined into a single word, you can probably bet that I don't censor it, but if it's by itself, I do. It's very inconsistent, and I apologize. I just kind of wanted to keep the flow, and it's kind of whatever's best for the flow without being too inflammatory. I want this to be informative first and archival second, and funny third. So, enough with the pregame, because I can only mentally prepare you so much before you're just hit with everything. So, once again, if you're a decent person or not interested in any of the primer that I've given you, I would recommend you go. I won't take it personally. Check out some of the other Francis Deck content. Ease yourself into it if you think that you may be able to warm up to it. If not, here is Francis Deck's United States of America, quote-unquote, rant. It goes as such, quote, "In all of my many appearances in United States gangster court, computer god, Frankenstein, earphone radio, controlled, closed society gangster courts, even farce U.S. Supreme Court. Everyone in every courtroom, from gangster judge, all of the gangster parroting puppet stooge juries, and even every one of my clients set me up to be swindled, even provocation murdered, because, quote, my brain is too big and complicated, unquote. Therefore, the computer god gave me no earphone radio, and lifelong has set me up for undetectable extermination, and to be robbed of everything by this gangster government, even feloniously changed my ownership and titles, etc., even of my instigated and gaining First World War II veteran New York liquor store license number 5020. This gangster government frauded to non-veteran. For many years, here I exist, facing jur USAlum, deadly gangsterism, relegated to adverse possession. Even my house, 26 to 28 Samus Place, Hempstead, New York, this government frauded to Joseph I. Deck, lifelong high bribe paid USA assassin agent of me, quote unquote, Crazy Joe Deck, lifelong secretly knows that Rose M. Deck, quote unquote, our mother, was sterilized in Germany by the to-be burned alive worst deadly gangster, kosher, electrical disease of the computer god, Crazy Joe, quote unquote, Deck, worldwide deadly dangerous narcotic addict, sodomist, repeat sodomist, murderer. Even in post-World War II distant Philippine occupation, police had to drag by Zerk from narcotics, quote-unquote,
Crazy Joe, Deck in navy chains of his hands, feet, and waist, from the battered dead body of a lady he did in. All secreted by Computer God, because he was a USA assassin agent of me.
So yeah, even for Francis, this is setting the tone a little strong. So what is the obfuscation here? Well, obviously, he's gonna try and make his bed with people like Robert Matthews and other people like that. And I'm going to tell you why I want to go with that comparison. Mainly because, first of all, I'm priming the Robert/Bobbert Matthews video. I'm going to call him Bobbert. I think it's so much funnier. I'm priming the Bobbert Matthews video in the future because he is same tier of insane. This could have probably been given to him and he'd be like, I feel like you're off on a couple points there, Francis, but you got the main idea. You got the spirit. But what's he saying? He's taking his own take on the Zionist-occupied government, obviously, when he says, oh, yeah, everything is controlled by certain people. I don't know. This video is just going to be a landmine. Bear with me, please. All these kosher courts, all these kosher clients, everyone is controlled. See, this is where it gets back to the narcissism when he starts saying things like, oh, yeah, even closed society gangster courts, even the U.S. Supreme Court, everyone in every courtroom, the judge and all of my clients and the juries set me up to be swindled and for my undetectable extermination. That is quintessential narcissist. It can't be my fault. It's obviously all these people who are below me conspiring against me because they have a fabricated, perfect reason to do this to me. And then he gives a little bit more enlightenment onto why he is lacking the earphone radio, which gives you orders from the computer god. And it's because he likes to flatter himself here. He's like, oh, my brain's too big. I actually am capable of thinking for myself, unlike these computer god pawns that wander around with their tiny walking, talking earphone radios that give them all the computer god orders. I'm too smart for such things. I, Francis E. Deck, a man who was going to own a liquor store and was oppressed for my brother and also claims that every court case is rigged against me, even though if you go at this from the non-computer god angle, he's kind of just incompetent in every situation he goes into, if not just a malignant nuisance all the time. But no, my brain is too big. I couldn't possibly do anything like that. It doxes himself again. And then he goes into he gets into the making you feel bad for him really fast, because this rant is one half Zionist-occupied government, Francis E. Deck edition, and the other half is Francis talking about how his brother is literally insane and how they need to split forever. And when you're reading it from Francis's perspective, it sounds really compelling as to why Francis would want to split up with his brother Joe. Because let's unpack it. Obviously, we now know his mother is Rose M. Deck, married to John Deck. Both of them are from former Austria-Hungary, Galicia. And he puts our mother in quotes, which really does give the question of, does he think he's adopted? Does he think he was generated? Like, how does the computer god create children? But she obviously can't be their mother because she was sterilized, which the entire sentence, like, oh yeah, my brother whom I love so much, the hired government assassin USA to undetectable exterminate me in the middle of the night, whatever the one in the previous rant was. Hold on, I gotta find it now. I gotta find it because I can't, like, deadly felon murderer or something. Hold on. I gotta find it. Okay, that took way longer than it needed to. It's the, oh yeah, Joseph I. Deck, my only brother, deadly felon murderer and secret spy assassin agent against me. That's what it is. I just thought that was always so funny because he's like, oh, my loving only brother, deadly felon murderer and secret assassin spy agent against me. But no, he actually triples down on that sentiment in this rant, because just in the sentence, it reveals so much. Crazy Joe, quote-unquote, Deck, lifelong secretly knows that Rose M. Deck, our mother, was sterilized in Germany by the to-be-burned-alive worst deadly gangster, kosher, electrical disease of the computer god, period. That sentence right there reveals so much that I don't even know if I'm qualified to unpack. First of all, he gives his brother a nickname, whatever. Second of all, he knows as a government agent that their mother, quote-unquote, was sterilized in Germany by the to-be-burned-alive worse-than-deadly gangster Kosher Electrical, because he normally just says disease of the computer god, or just disease. Now we know it's electrical. And I'm having a hard time, like, thinking of what it might be. But if I had to extrapolate, this is me putting on the schizo hat, if I take a bunch of liberties and say, this is an example of the computer god manipulating history. This is obviously the computer god setting up, oh, here's your mom, quote unquote, and filling in Joseph Deck on what he has to do. He has to get rid of Francis. This is computer god orders. He can't disobey. And the electrical disease of the computer god. I wonder if he's like lucid about his own schizophrenia. That's kind of the vibe that I'm getting, because in secret containment policy, obviously you have like it hijacks the micro miniature electrical intelligence system in your body thing, right? So is the computer god able to change that? Well, obviously because of the robot operating cabinet and, the seam where... I'm not going into that. But is it the schizophrenia? Is he saying that the computer god gave him schizophrenia and he's, like, lucid of it while in his schizophrenic... Like, he's so delusional, he loops around to being quote-unquote normal while living in his schizophrenic world, where he's so deep in the schizophrenic delusion that he sees the computer god give him schizophrenia and he says, oh, wait, it's the computer god's fault that I'm tripping. But that is just like one of the most odd sentences that you have to unpack, and I think I'm just gonna leave it at there. And he also throws a lot of accusations on his brother, a lot of which are just completely censored out, and it sounds like, from what we know about Joe Deck, if we take Francis at his word, I don't want to say it's par for the course, but it's definitely not something you'd say like, whoa, that's crazy. It's kind of in Francis's wheelhouse, because he's already painted his brother Joe as, not a nice person when it comes to living with him, but this one just actually says, oh yeah, he was part of the Philippines occupation and he, ended this woman and, assaulted her while she was dead. And I don't even want to consider that that's a valid thing. I like to think Joseph Deck is just the typical domestic Pole, if you catch my drift. But obviously, he's a government assassin, so all of this is secret and no one's gonna tell you about it, but I know about it because I'm the one with the big brain. They couldn't implant all the Frankenstein controls in there because my brain is too big, even though my brain would be on the moon. Checkmate, computer god. Anyway, what's the next part say? Oh, wait, this is gonna have to unpack his legal case. Oh, okay, I'm gonna go into it. Quote,
from distant small gangster all-state insurance company, blushing New York office in the few months, quote-unquote, Crazy Joe Deck was there as part-time lowest adjuster. Computer got controlled. Deadly gangster CIA police fabricated over a dozen auto accident cases with me as the lawyer. One of said cases was for a teenage, no-schooling auto theft ring interracial pregnant harlot felon gangster
Kosher woman
for Jewmocracy atonement for her life of crimes. She was controlled, briefed, and bribed by the quote-unquote Sicilian
black person
mafia Frank Gulata, district attorney of Nassau County, parentheses, the blackest Ginny I have ever seen, end parentheses, and his gangster staff, like all of these from out of nowhere clients. I went with said
kosher woman
to the Allstate Insurance Company mandated medical examination. I watched her state her tiny $400 personal injury claim as the Allstate Insurance Company doctor examined her body for her claimed injuries. Like other insurance companies, Allstate Insurance Company mandated such medical examinations as the basis for settlement of all injury claims. A few weeks later, quote-unquote, Crazy Joe Deck staged his oft-repeated jealousy, hatred, berserk tantrums against me in my law office. As I entered my rear office, I noticed the filing cabinet drawer pulled open with a couple white manila file envelopes pulled halfway out, parentheses, the file envelopes of the
kosher woman,
end parentheses, and quickly, quote-unquote, Crazy Joe Deck grabbed these two prearranged file envelopes of said gangster
kosher woman
and feloniously, he ripped them up under orders of his boss, mafia gangster Frank Gulana, District Attorney of Nassau County. Thereafter, unbelievably, I found my New York State form small retainer signed by the kosher woman, making me her lawyer for said injury claim. It was not ripped up like the rest of her injury claim papers. I left said retainer with the rest of his papers in the file envelope of the other injury claimants against Allstate Insurance Company in this same accident case. Okay, I gotta cut him off somewhere, because I honestly am tempted to just let him go right through, but I have to cut in here and say my piece, because the next part is, I'm gonna try and do this in 3 lumps because there's not really many good stopping points. So this is going to be the middle of saying what he's gonna say, and then the last part is going to be an explanation, probably with something funny at the end, because I listen to separate music from what's in the background of these videos while I record, and right now I'm gonna reveal what it is. But the song is like 1 minute and 46 seconds, and I like looping music, but it's actually starting to get to me. So if this seems like a little more unhinged than usual, that's fine. It's all part of the plan, the computer god overall plan. It's all part of it. But this is him reframing the entire massive, gigantic legal case that I'm not going to recap. Go watch the Supreme Court video. I will not stop advertising it. I put my life, blood, and soul into that thing. Please, it gives you a full rundown of the case as we understand it. I would love to get the full case file. I don't know if I can get it. I don't know if it even exists anymore. But I'll fill you in on the gritty details that you need to know. First of all, this kosher woman that he's talking about is a woman named Elizabeth Virschning. And she has a small $400 accident claim, which is disputed of how it goes. In the legal trial that Frances presides over, well, not presides over, participates in as her lawyer, it effectively turns into a fraud case because she is going to be paid $400, and her side of the story is, I never received this money. This is so weird. Can anyone help me out with this? And his side of the story is, oh, she received her money. She just promised me $200, and she was also going to do this divorce case that was another $250, which I received her money, but she had kind of already promised me all of it, so I just kept it, and I'm waiting on $50 from her. The harassment from everyone else doesn't really matter. Just know that this $400 is mine, and that's a legal case. If that sounds fun, I guarantee you it's way more fun because he's gonna try and blame everyone but himself. Go watch it. It seriously provides so much context to this, but you can go forward without it because he completely throws everything that the state said, everything that he says, everything in that video is basically null and void for what he's trying to say here, because it's just completely different. It's completely different in the sense that he just takes whatever from whole cloth. It's like if you had the skeleton, right? You're looking at the skeleton and you say, yeah, that looks like a person, and then it just grows like fungal mold and milk starts coming out of its eyes, and you're like, it doesn't look like a person anymore. And then, you throw some glistening oil in there and it like starts to get up and walk on its hands and skull, and you're like, he just reanimates this thing from whole cloth, completely unrecognizable from what it already was, and that SparkNotes version of the story is now no longer applicable at all, because now his brother plays a key role in this. Notice how I didn't mention his brother? That's because he doesn't care. They're not living together at this point, because this is when they actually have their own lives, and Francis wasn't, financially destitute at his front door. So, in his new version of events, the computer god, through the New York State Police and the CIA, fabricated a bunch of accident cases, which Francis had to take through computer god manipulation. Trying to translate this into reality, Francis had taken a few accident claims before this one that was a fraud case. He was accused of running an ambulance chasing ring, although he would pin this basically saying, everyone else is doing this, not me, and they're just making me the scapegoat that they're gonna pin everything on, which, historical argument, right? It's one side versus the other. You can't take one testimony over the other, so it stands neutrally. But this is second confirmation that he's taken multiple cases, and he points out that the most significant one, being the last one, is Elizabeth Virschning's case, and takes a bunch of opportunities to call her a bunch of pejoratives, and basically calls her a felon, saying that to atone for her life of crime in the computer god's eyes, she was
coached, briefed, and told what to say, controlled by the computer god through Frank Gulata, who is basically his arch nemesis throughout every single interaction with him. He never writes positively out of him, and he has another letter called the Louis Lekowitz letter, which is going to be him effectively just yelling at Frank Gulata, screaming "Old Man Yells at Cloud" style, and once again goes into it more in that giant Supreme Court video, but calls him a bunch of pejoratives, and he says, oh, none of these were set up, probably because they're all auto accident claims, so it's really easy for them to be quote-unquote fabricated. And he then says, oh yeah, I accompanied her to this medical examination. By the way, he doesn't specify the name of the doctor, which is actually super important, because he claims she went to a Dr. Milton E. Robbins, and she claims she went to the Allstate insurance company doctor. He's got some name, I think it's like Dr. Rosenbaum or something like that. But their doctors are different, and he doesn't provide a name, so we just kind of have to assume that yes, it did happen and he was with her. And after this, a few weeks later, Crazy Joe accompanied him to his office, doing his typical, oh, I'm being a wandering vagrant, oh, I'm being so annoying, I'm berserk off of narcotics. And Francis, in kind of a movie-esque scene, sees the documents in the drawer and he's like, oh, I might as well seal that up. But his brother, being crazed and controlled by the computer god to some degree, runs over and shreds up all these important documents that he would have won the case with. And he then says, oh yeah, I somehow found this retainer form that was signed by her saying that I was gonna be her lawyer, and it wasn't ripped up with all the other key stuff, along with the other stuff that Joe ripped up. He's so crazy. Wink wink. Crazy Joe. That's what I think of whenever I say Crazy Joe. The part that is contradictory to this is everything, because he completely leaves out the character of Detective Becker, who is, in the original his story, which is kind of halfway in between this completely made-up fantasy and the court's account of what actually happened. In his middle ground story, Detective Becker is the one that, under orders from the computer god, purloins all of these important documents and steals them away to Frank Gulata, where they'll then have a meeting, and this meeting is disputed by a bunch of different sources, aka Francis again, and the state. But he kind of touches on it in part 2, so that's your homework. Go watch the Supreme Court video before the next one, because the next one really requires that you have that context. But anyway, let's finish this up. We can have a little funny bit at the end, and Francis continues, quote, many months later, the husband of these other injury claimants against Allstate Insurance Company came to me and confessed, even though he had received the small Allstate Insurance Company settlement and he had signed documents for me in said case, the district attorney's staff ordered him to perjure himself and say he knew nothing about the said injury claim. He refused because I had these said documents to disprove such perjuries. In a few days, the deadly gangster CIA police, under threat of death, ordered him to keep everything secret and to not testify for Mr. Immediately. In Jur Salem manner, he was put out of business and ruined. He sold his house and left Nassau County secreted from me. BT, the deadly gangster computer god. A couple weeks later, Mafia Ginny, Gangster Frank Gulata, as district attorney with felonious trick of criminal subpoena of me to his office for a non-existent grand jury for unnamed matter. Upon entering Mafia Gangster Ginny, Frank Gulata's district attorney's office for said illegal subpoena, not only several of his staff, but even Ginny Gangster Frank Gulata, Chief Ginny Mafia district attorney, began screaming at me that I completely fabricated the said kosher woman's injury claim with no client, no retainer, and no legal file on the matter. From the simultaneous screaming and harangues, inadvertently, they boasted that I was to be made an example. Mr. Francis E. Deck is to be the atonement victim for the to-be-burned-alive gangster computer god worst deadly Frankenstein Radiohead electrical kosher disease, especially the kosher lawyer and kosher judge profession. Each and every kosher lawyer, untouchably lifelong, each year swindles many thousands of dollars from insurance companies with non-existent fabricated auto accident claims, especially kosher lawyers who need many thousands of dollars to buy and pay for each and every judgeship in the United States. And gangster. Wacky, huh? This is why I said that him and, all those unscrupulous people would get along super well. He's just concerned about the auto accident claims, and he says the computer god controls everything. Okay, I just gotta close it out. It'll be okay. It'll be okay. That's the computer god telling you that. Don't worry. It'll be okay. It's something. What is this channel anymore? Your channel's something. Anyway, another confusing thing, getting back to the story as is completely fabricated from what I can tell. He says, months later, the husband of these other injury claimants, which means either this guy is a polygamist or he means the husbands of the other claimants, because, this is the 50s and 60s when these cases would have taken place. So, men have dominion over their wives, and he's kind of saying like, oh yeah, I did all the business with the husbands. These wives are just crazy. You know how they are. Obviously, being classical Polish, Slovene is kind of par for the course. But, he says these people, or this one guy came and confessed to me that I actually signed all these documents, and then he was manipulated by Frank Gulata to say all these untrue things and perjure himself, and that he couldn't testify for me. By the way, sorry about that. It's not testify for Mr. Immediately. It's testify for me, period, immediately in Jur Salem manner. And then they say, oh, once they're done with him, they ruined him economically, and he moved out of Nassau County, and I never saw him again, and that's how you know that he's a computer god pawn, because he's going to be used by the computer god manipulated history to be some character that I know about. He could be Jimmy Carter for all I know. And he kind of gets this. Remember how I mentioned that meeting with Frank Gulata and how it happened? He gets it mixed up about how it actually happened, because in the court documents, he says all these subpoenas because he goes and says, hey, Frank Gulata, if there's going to be a grand jury hearing for anything that I did, could you let me know? And Frank Gulata says, yep. And he then holds a grand jury hearing anyway, like 6 months later, and Francis is really upset about this. So what he does is he goes and files a bunch of these illegal subpoenas, or subpoenas for basically nothing, basically probing out to see if he can find anything that the state is doing against him. And he just flip-flops that and says, oh yeah, Frank Gulata illegally subpoenaed me to be in his office so he could just yell at me and tell me that I was stupid, when I actually had all the documents that could disprove these perjuries with me the whole time, so why didn't you use them? Isn't that kind of weird? A little bit of an inconsistency there. And then he just kind of goes off. He's like, oh yeah, all of you guys are concerned about like racial purity and whatever this nonsense is. Oh yeah, these people control the country. Who cares? I care about certain groups of people making large amounts of money off of fraudulent auto accident claims. Which, you know what? You do you. Not a big grift, but I mean, you gotta find your niche. Lord knows I still need to find mine. I guess my niche is, it's something. That's what the catchphrase should be. Worm speaker, it's something. And gangster. I just love the little unenthusiastic end gangster at the end. I was so burnt out, and part 2 is going to be even more insane. I have no idea how I'm going to commentate over that. But I'm going to give you a little treat for making it all the way to the end. Treat yourself. It's a little treat. Instead of doing a Patreon read, which I don't have, or advertising any of the social media that I have none. Except maybe a Discord, but I don't think y'all are ready for that yet. There's only a few select people who I deem worthy, and I don't know if I ever should open up a Discord to the public. I feel like, I don't know, maybe I'll post a poll about it or something, I don't know. But your little treat. So, remember how I mentioned that one song that I was looping is like 1 minute and 42 seconds long? Well, if you are a dog and in tune with your dog whistles, I was listening to the Kirby Air Ride music for Item Bounce because Kirby Air Riders just came out, and they kept the song in the game. I was like, there's no way they're gonna keep it in the game. But it's just insane that they did. So, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do one of those, like the Gregnant, those style of videos. I'm going to read out all the top comments on the original Item Bounce upload to close out the video while something funny on the screen happens. So, get ready and I'm gonna try and fit it into 1 minute and 26 seconds. So, and then the video will just end. It'll be funny, it'll be cool. Here's a little treat, okay, go. I open the comments on this video every couple of weeks, and there's just a whole new batch every time. But sir, the Halberd is an allied starship. Look inside. Account based in Nicopolis. Kirby wrote lots of Christmas songs that don't mention Christ in order to make the poem focus on presents instead. When your greatest ally hits your ship with a war star. The Yoshi's Island files are released. Look inside the files. black boxes. I can't believe Kirby had secret tunnels underneath DDD's castle. Why does every president of the Mushroom Kingdom have to touch the Fountain of Dreams? King DDD was just seen being shoved onto a warp star alongside his wife and being flown back to Dreamland. This song is really nostalgic to me. It reminds me of my early life. Release the Yoshi's Island files! The Kirby cries out as he inhales you. Strange, why are all the world leaders walking out on King DDD's speech? When DDD owns nukes, it's suddenly a crime. 0 days without Waddle Dee trickery. When you're running for office in Unova, but they keep asking you if you'll visit Dreamland if you win. Anyone else find it strange how no matter who gets elected in the Mushroom Kingdom, Dreamland always benefits? Oh boy, I hope my coin tax goes to the Mushroom Kingdom Disaster Relief Program. The humble Kirby. They always call you an anti-Dreamlander, but never a liar. I am not dying for Dreamland.